One of the stories in last week's episode was actually a part of a series of postings from an alleged professional shaman. She basically recounted an anecdote from her day-to-day work as a shaman in each posting. On my channel alone, there are a lot of stories featuring a shaman, but it's not that common to come across such a candid account from a shaman herself. There are 19 postings from her, and I chose some more interesting ones for this week's episode. I've already discussed about shaman and shamanism in Korea in my past episodes, and if you missed them, I'll link the playlist in the description and at the corner of the screen. But to sum up the general concept and perception of a shaman in Korea, shamans are basically people chosen by a god or multiple gods as their mouthpiece. Often they are people who already showed some natural spiritual power, but that's not always the case. Shamanic gods' choice is heavy-handed. If one refuses their call, they'll bring ailments and misfortunes till one bends in and accepts the fate. It takes a formal ritual, usually led by another established shaman, and training to master the day-to-day business and skill as a professional shaman. A shaman's power and characteristics depends on what kind of god or gods he or she serves. And I say gods because it's not uncommon for a shaman to serve several gods at the same time, just as the shaman in today's stories. She seems to serve at least several, including that of a granny, grandpa, a young woman, and a boy. As you can see from that example alone, shamanic gods can come in all forms and shapes, from a baby, a young lady, an old man, historic figure, to a guardian god of a mountain. Overall, shaman's work covers all areas of paranormals in Korea: fortune-telling, medium, clairvoyant, and if needed, an exorcist. Today's stories are interesting for their bizarre accounts themselves, but also because they clearly show the backbone of philosophy of Korean shamanism, the karma and family obligation both in life and death. With that basic concept in mind, let's read the stories of day-to-day life of a professional shaman in Korea. As always, handpicked, translated, and narrated by host Anthony. Today, a client called me and commissioned to come around to his place. Well, my home is 5 hours' drive away from Seoul, where the client's place was. But he offered to pay all the extras for the trip and accommodation. And after all, a work is a work. God, I had never seen a house so full of spirits. From the moment I stepped in, above the shoe cabinet and every corner, my body reacted first with a cracking headache and nausea. In the end, I had to throw up first before I could get to work. Soon, the spirit of an old man contacted me. He claimed that he was the owner of the place. And often it's the case with the ghosts who fail to move on. He had his own sad story. Once his children took all the property from him, they just abandoned him, and he died alone in that house. His body was found a month after by the officer who came to collect monthly fee for water. But his spirit remained, waiting for his children to return, and fiercely protected his old place whenever somebody moved in, creating havocs, sleep paralysis, and all sorts of bad lucks. His endeavor also attracted other shady wandering ghosts too, adding more havoc to whomever tried to live there. The client who called me was already the 12th new buyer since the old man passed away. The ghost's requirement was simple enough. He would go if he should see his children one more time. He still remembered whereabout his son lived, and turned out it wasn't even far away. I visited him right away because I was so pissed about the poor old man's story. The son lived in a nice place, which made me even more mad. Understandably, he didn't believe me at first. Well, some random shaman claiming that his late father was still around. But it changed when the spirit of the old man started speaking through me. At first, he could just cry. And then he called his son by the nickname he used to call when his son was little. The son's face froze, and in the end joined in crying, saying it was indeed his father. He was so sorry, etc. He promised that he'd offer a ritual for his late father's journey to heaven, but the old man's spirit just said it was good enough to see his son's face once again, and he would move on all right. Once his presence gone, I could cleanse the rest of the ghosts in the house relatively easily. All I can say is parents' love for their children runs really deep. And be good to your parents. It's a common perception that our ancestors should play the role of a guardian angel for us. But nothing's for free. A middle-aged woman visited me and told her story today. She and her husband were poor. They saw no way out of the poverty unless they had won a lottery or something. They tried their luck with a weekly lottery ticket, but of course it would remain an elusive dream. But probably because their wish was so earnest, her late mother-in-law appeared in her husband's dream and showed 4 numbers as the back number of football players. In the morning he tried to remember which numbers they were, but could only remember 2 of them. They prayed to late mother to take pity on them and appear one more time. And indeed, the mother-in-law once again showed her husband the same numbers, this time as the back numbers of baseball players. But alas, her husband still failed to remember 1 number. Such was their luck, they thought. But the following night, late mother appeared again and showed the same 4 numbers, this time as the signs of sports fans holding up. Now, her husband finally got all 4 numbers. And then the next night, she appeared again, this time in both her husband's and her dreams, and showed 2 more numbers. She also said, should her numbers lead to a lottery win, they should offer a ritual for her peaceful move on to heaven. Otherwise, she would claim her own prize from them. The couple of course bought lottery tickets based on the 6 numbers their mother showed them. And golly ho, they won the 2nd prize. Their fortune turned around. They paid back all the debt and bought themselves a nice house too. But in all that excitement, they forgot about the ritual for their late mother. One day, late mother appeared once again in their dream with an angry face. She just left a sign that said, "Promise," and went away. Unfortunately, the couple didn't take it seriously. Sometime later, mother appeared in their dream yet another time and showed them number 25. Oh, could she be giving them another winning lottery number? Maybe she's dropping 1 number at a time so that they could remember easily, they thought. Then her husband went on a holiday to one of his friends who runs a snake farm. He helped his friend fixing a snake cage. And then he suddenly collapsed The witnesses insisted that the snake in the cage didn't even move, but it managed to spat its poison at the client's husband. He was taken to the hospital but failed to survive. It was on the 25th day of the month. Only then, now widowed client regretted their neglect, but she could not even sustain the lament and remorse for the strange sense that her dead husband was still around her, and hence came to seek my opinion. She was all tears by the end of her story. I could manage to contact her late mother-in-law, but the only thing she said was, "Don't break promises." Unfortunately, I have no power to turn back the time and correct the past. I could just tell her to regain her strength to live on and not to forget her lesson. A client visited today. There was a spirit of a little kid around her. Even as a spirit, he was still a kid and could hardly contain his giggles. I think he thought I wouldn't be able to detect him, but once I glared at him, he was not so giggly anymore, but whispered to the client to turn back and go away. My lady guard shouted at him, "You rat! What are you doing sitting in the chest of the poor woman? Come out right now!" The kid spirit was duly scared and disappeared into the client's chest. When the client finally talked to me, she said she was suffering what felt like a possession. All the while the kid spirit ebbed out of the woman's chest and dared to negotiate with my lady god that he'd do anything she'd want if she'd leave him alone. Of course my lady god wouldn't let him have his way and told him to first come out of the woman's body and have a proper discussion, to which the kid spirit reacted with what I could only call as a temper tantrum. To persuade him to calm down and talk took a good 1 hour at least. The spirit had his own sad story. He was about 5 when he died for the reasons he himself didn't understand. He'd been looking around for his mom, and when he found the client who looked like his mom, as old as his mom, and whose frequency was open to spirits, the boy spirit thought it was his mom and settled in her. All he wanted was motherly love. But of course we couldn't let the client suffer either. I tried to persuade him to let her go and move on, but his thirst for love and care was so great that it wasn't an easy task. In the end, I told the client to come back the following day. But the client didn't return or called all day the following day. It was a busy day for me, but somehow I could not stop thinking about her and the boy ghost. It was only in the evening after my dinner that I got a call.
"Please, help me."
It was the client, and something was definitely going on. It turned out to be a good insight on my part to ask for her address previous day, which normally I never do. You may think, of course it's because you are a shaman, but I don't know. It definitely wasn't because my gods told me to. Anyway, I didn't even change my clothes, hopped on my car, and started driving to her place. Probably about 5 minutes into the journey, I got a call from her again. I took a deep breath and took it.
"I know you are coming. Don't, or else I'm gonna crash your car."
It was the client, but actually the kid spirit that was talking through her. Little ghosts are often too young to understand karma and what's good and wrong. They just do what they want, so the threat was likely not just hot air. But I'm a shaman serving various gods. I couldn't be put off by such a threat. And 20 minutes later, I safely arrived. Her house was musky and gloomy, exactly the kind of place where ghosts love to hang around. Inside was a mess. Household stuff was strewn about, kitchen knives were stuck here and there, and her husband was just smoking, looking half-minded. I quickly went around room to room to cleanse. That's the first step a shaman does before any ritual, basically clearing the ground for whatever is to come. The kid ghost tried to run away, but I blocked and made him come inside me. He stayed in me for 2 hours. At first he yelled and threw fits, but in the end he got tired of it all and just talked about his short life. That in life nobody really loved him, and when he died nobody really cried for him either. The loneliness and hunger for love was keeping him here. He then said he'd wish to have Mom's dinner one last time, and then he would move on. My client freshly cooked a bowl of rice and put fried sausages on it, and prayed for the boy to move on to the peaceful world.
Dear boy, I believe it's not that your mom abandoned you. I'm sure she too thinks of you deep inside, she said.
The boy ghost cried, ate his last meal, said sorry, and moved away. I told the client it was all done now, and she did exactly what she was supposed to do and say. She just smiled a bitter smile and said,
No, it's just I too feel lonely and understand how the boy should feel.
Considering how her husband just stayed off all the while, I guess the poor woman was not much loved either. It's a pity a shaman can't solve all the problems. One day, a client brought in 5 or so looking young girl. People would seldom bring a young child with them when they visit a shaman, but I could see the girl wasn't just any normal girl. As soon as she and her mother sat themselves down, I asked the little girl, "You see these people behind me, don't you?" By which I meant the gods I serve and present with me when I'm at work. The girl nodded her head and commented,
Yes, there are many. Grandpa, Granny, uncles and aunties.
She must have been born with a strong third eye. Listening to her own daughter's answer, her mother's face got clouded. The mother explained she already visited several shamans to ask for an advice about her unusual daughter, and they all said the girl was destined to accept a god, and that they would lead the ordaining ritual. I could not help but scoffing. I can't emphasize enough that one having the third eye or spiritual gift does not necessarily mean one is destined to become a shaman. I think these other shamans saw the little girl as an opportunity to earn money. A big ritual like an ordaining ritual can cost lots of money. I told the mother that they were wrong and she should not trust them. But what could she do then, she asked. I told her she should leave her daughter with me for a week. Understandably, the mother wasn't sure. Who could willingly leave her child under the care of a stranger, let alone a shaman? She went out to have a long talk with her husband on the phone, while the little girl was busy playing with my boy god. She didn't seem to distinguish boy god from any ordinary child. In the end, her parents agreed to leave her to me. The girl herself accepted this unusual arrangement without much question. She seemed to be just happy to have found a new friend, the boy god. Over the following few days, I performed little cleansing rituals around her as my grandpa god instructed. Into the 4th day, the little girl said to me, "Where's the boy gone, my friend? Where's everybody gone? I don't see Granny and Grandpa either." Her third eye got closed. Her mother was of course delighted now that her daughter can grow up as a normal child. She has become a regular client of mine, and her daughter also visits with her mom occasionally and would call me auntie. I don't know what you think of shaman, but I have to tell you it's not so much different from an athlete. The spiritual power, connection to gods, and clarity of the insight do not just stay as they came if you don't care for and train them constantly. And for a shaman, the training usually comes in the form of a prayer, usually somewhere out in the nature where clear energy flows. One day I had such a prayer into early hours of the morning. I was of course pretty knackered the following day. Even my usually unrelenting gods would let me relax in such a case, so I slept in till midday and took a day off for the rest of the day. In the afternoon, I went to visit an electronics shop owned by an acquaintance, looking to buy a humidifier. But where I stopped was in front of an exhibition model of a TV, because a spirited old man was sitting on it. Such a presence is usually a bad news for the business. I asked the acquaintance if that particular TV had been sitting on the floor for a long time. "Why, do you see something again?" was her first response. Indeed, the TV wouldn't sell even though it was a very popular model. She tried a heavy discount for it being an exhibition model, but not a single inquiry she would get. "Why don't you buy it off me then? I'll give you an extra discount," she said. I explained there was a spirit of an old man on the TV and tried to talk to him. And you guessed it, another sad story. Before he died, his daughter was preparing for wedding. The old man was happy for her and also liked his son-in-law-to-be. There wasn't much he could do for them because he was poor, but he wanted at least to buy them a TV as a gift. He saw this particular model and liked it. He saved up bit by bit over a few months, occasionally dropping by the shop to look at the TV meantime. But on the day he finally came to buy the TV on his bike, he got a car accident and passed away. His earthly existence gone, but his strong wish to get the TV for his daughter remained. And so he was still by the TV. I passed on the ghost story to my acquaintance, the shop owner. She asked what he looked like and whereabout he lived, and figured out who his daughter should be because she bought most of electronics for her honeymoon home there. My acquaintance reached out to the daughter. Of course they were skeptical, but my acquaintance was kind and helpful to them, enough for them to trust that she couldn't be telling them a pure fantasy. And the daughter and her husband came by in the evening. I described how her dad looked and the details of the family history. The daughter bursted into tears, and the spirit of her dad as well.
I'm sorry, my dear. I really wanted to buy you this TV. But never mind about me, and have a happy life together. I'll be looking after you,
the spirit said, which made me teary too. After all the tears and words of warm love, the spirit finally moved on. I hear the daughter came back a few days later to buy the TV. Well, once again, such is the parents' love. This one is from when I was still a newbie shaman. At that stage, I was yet just more or less a fortune teller and thought it would be just a usual day when a client phoned me to book a session. But before I knew it, my body reacted first. Nausea, piercing headache, body aching all over. I even bled a bit from my ears. When a middle-aged woman arrived at the reserved time, I knew why that was. Some 7-8 spirits followed her into my room, of all different gender and age, even down to a baby that was still sucking on its thumb. Among my gods, usually it's the lady god who is most active, but I think they all sensed it wasn't just any ordinary occasion, and the granny god herself stepped in. Granny god may seem gentle at first, especially next to quick and tough lady god, but once she's full on force, she becomes fierce. The client said as soon as she sat down that she wanted to accept her gods and become a shaman. Clearly she'd seen some other shamans already. My granny god told her that she was not built to become a god's vessel, and the spirits surrounding her were not gods she thought they were. The client protested that other shamans she visited said otherwise, that all her troubles and ailments would be gone once she accepted gods in her. So began the back and forth argument, and I felt my granny god drawing out her force gradually. Eventually, the oldest of the spirits that followed the client around stepped forward and spoke through her. I'm only meaning well for my descendant. I'll make her healthy and prosperous once she accepts me as her god. What's there to argue against that? But my granny god shouted back that she was but a lost soul. What kind of god tortures her own descendant to fulfill her own desire? The old spirit cried out if I had any idea what it was like to be forgot and not offered a single bowl of rice in their remembrance. My granny god countered if that be her main disgruntlement, we would offer one big ritual. Wouldn't that be enough for her to leave her poor descendant alone and move on? But the old spirit wouldn't listen and threw a temper tantrum that she would become a god, we should make her so. My granny god was now proper upset. She whistled, and all the gods I serve came out and surrounded the unruly spirits. My granny god shouted that they were mistaken if they thought they could have their way by causing havocs and throwing temper tantrum. Overwhelmed by the force of my gods, now they cried, "We are fucked! So I told you not to come here," etc. In the end, the client jumped up and left. My granny god tusked and said that those unruly lost souls would take over the woman in the end. Indeed, earlier this year I heard she sought another shaman's help to perform the ritual of ordain, only to go totally out of control. She would come up to any random passerby and would tell them whatever comes to her mind. I feel sad for her, but a shaman can't help one who refuses to help oneself. One day I was out in Keryong Mountain in search for a spot to pray. It's not always easy to find the right spot, especially in such a rainy summer as this year. I made a break on the way to take in the view, and finally found a place where my gods also approved of. I found a lodging nearby to drop my stuffs and lie down for a while before going praying, until I felt the familiar chills. And indeed I saw a face peeping in through the door. It was a ghost of a soldier. Half of his face bore burned scar. One leg was missing, and on his chest was a gunshot wound. Even as a shaman, running into a strange ghost is alarming. When I knew little, I used to casually chat up with them, but that's actually a pretty risky thing because you cannot always tell what they want. I started reciting repelling spell, but the soldier ghost started crying and begged to hear his story. He was just an ordinary man married with 2 little kids when Korean War broke. One night he was just dragged out and was forced to join the army. On the battlefield where bullets and hand grenade rained down, all he thought about was to survive and go back to his family. But the fate was not on his side. One day he was hit by fragments from a grenade, wounding him severely on his face and leg, and then finished by a bullet a North Korean soldier shot to confirm kill. Apparently none of her wife and children survived the war either. Now all was left from the whole family clan was a blue and white vase that came down as an heirloom. All he hoped for was to find it back. I told him I had no knowledge of antiques, and searching for it would be like a needle in a haystack. But the soldier ghost pointed out a certain antique shop in Gwangju City that they held his vase. He asked me to get it and bury where he breathed his last breath. Happened to be where I made a break on the way earlier. It was a tall order. A newbie shaman lives on a tight budget after investing setting up a shrine and business establishment. But I couldn't ignore poor ghost's plea either. I first searched on the internet, and indeed there was an antique shop by the name in Gwangju. I just paid a visit, and there it was, the blue and white vase. I explained to the shop owner what brought me there. Not sure if he really believed me, but he mentioned that indeed that particular vase would not sell and had been sitting in his shop for many years. The price was still too much for me to buy on the spot, but I promised to come back and he should hold it for me. I'm still putting money aside month by month for that. Hi, it's Anthony here, and thank you very much for listening. I hope you enjoyed today's stories. Another episode about shamans. If you've been following my channel for some time, I believe you could understand various concepts in today's stories, but if there was anything unclear or hard to understand, do let me know in the comment, and I'll try and explain as much as I know. If you enjoyed my work, please give it a thumbs up and a comment, and please consider subscribing to my channel. If you'd support me more directly, I also have a Buy Me a Coffee account. The link's in the description. Buy Me a Coffee supporters enjoy an early access to my new video. Thank you. Now just one more episode to go before 150th episode. I'll see you on Sunday. Until then, stay safe and take care.